A group of guys dragged the main character into a small room and locked it. And as soon as the boy began to ask for help, the door was immediately opened by a guy who promised to save him. As soon as Wen returned home, he immediately went to Yan Shen's room. The main character entered the room and saw a sleeping guy, but he suddenly woke up and painfully grabbed Wen's wrist. Suddenly, Wen dropped Yan Shen's photo and it broke, for which the guy hit the main character in the face. The guy started screaming for the main character to leave his room because he was disgusted by his face. It turned out that the guys had just recently gotten married, but Wen's life was not as beautiful and fabulous as everyone said about it. After the ceremony itself, Yan Shen unexpectedly, after someone called Yan Shen, he again attacked Wen, asking if he was involved in the fact that the guy broke up with his lover before marriage. The guy thought that the main character was involved in this matter, since he really wanted to marry Guy. Yan Shen warned the main character that if he hurt Luan, the guy would not just leave it like that. After half a month with the guys, the main character undertook to take the documents to the guy, and on the way he bought a cake, since it was their wedding anniversary. As soon as the elevator doors opened, Wen saw Yan Shen and his lover in an embrace. The main character sat and waited for the guy until nightfall, but when he came, he asked the main character for a divorce and presented divorce papers. Yan Shen again started yelling at Wen and demanding that he sign the documents, but as soon as the main character refused to sign, the guy hit him in the face again. The guy pushed the main character and he hit his head on the table. Yan Shen hit Wen on the floor again and he lost consciousness. As soon as the main character came to his senses, the guy's mother ran into his room and started asking if he was feeling okay. But as soon as the guy wanted to take her away, the woman hit him in the face. As soon as the boy's mother asked Yan Shen to leave, she immediately began to say that the main character was not guilty of anything, since the guy simply did not understand him. As soon as Yan Shen returned to Gu Corporation, Luan immediately rushed to hug the guy. It turned out that Luan began to plan something, and in fact, he needed a wedding with a guy for other purposes. While Uncle Shu was treating Wen's wounds, he began to shout and insult Yan Shen for what he did to the main character. But after calming the man down, the main character decided to go out and take a walk alone. It turned out that even in childhood, as soon as Yan Shen saved Wen from a closed storage room, he went to play the piano, and as soon as the main character heard him play, he immediately fell in love with him. Suddenly, Wen began to chicken out and fall, but then the blonde caught him, preventing him from falling. It turned out that Tang Xiao was an acquaintance of the main character, who knew that the main character had a phobia of touching. As soon as Wen went to the ward, Tang Xiao was very happy that he was able to see the main character again. After the guy was discharged, he went shopping to buy Yan Shen a coat. Suddenly, Wen saw Yan Shen leaving the store with his lover, and so he immediately ran into an alley, and Luan immediately followed him. In the alley, the main character said that he knew about Luan's show and about his uncle, which put the guy into a stupor. After Wen took a shower, Tang Xiao immediately texted him and immediately called him. The main character even smiled at the guy's message. Unexpectedly, the guy invited the main character to go to the concert with him. While Tang Xiao was waiting for Wen, he remembered his school days and how much he liked the main character. As soon as the guys met, they immediately went to their places and talked about life along the way. Suddenly, the pianist began to play the same melody that Yan Shen played the first time they met the main character. Just as Tang Xiao was about to take out the handkerchief, he saw a guy and his lover in the next row, and he became very angry. As soon as the guys were about to leave, Wen still saw Yan Shen with his lover. As soon as he and Tang Xiao left the hall, he suggested going to dinner together, which made the guy very happy. Restaurant Kukushka was recognized as one of the most romantic restaurants in the city. Tang Xiao also visited all the nearby restaurants to prepare for a rare date with Wen Niannan, and finally found this romantic restaurant thanks to a friend's recommendation. Seeing the expression of great joy on Tang Xiao's face, he also laughed. Communication between them gradually became more and more relaxed. The guy continued to tell funny stories from his life and jokes to entertain Wen. Looking at the smiling man in front of him, the main character felt very light in his soul. Seeing the bright smile in front of him, Wen Nianen felt a little sorry for Tang Xiao. After all, he could not reciprocate, since the main character went to meet him only out of anger towards Yan Shen. Suddenly, an angry voice was heard behind the main character. Wen Nianen was in a state of shock. He slowly turned around and met Gu Yansheng's gaze, which was a mixture of rage and indifference. The main character never expected to meet Gu Yansheng and his lover here. Shen Luan looked towards Wen, grinned, and looked at him triumphantly with eyes full of mockery, since the guy again demanded that the main character terminate the engagement. Gu Yansheng did not expect that Wen Nianen, who never dared to contradict him, would say something towards him. From surprise, he went into a stupor, but he immediately started shouting at the main character in front of everyone. Tang Xiao stood up to intercede for Wen, as the main character began to tremble. As soon as the guys started quarreling, the main character stopped them and said that he and Tang Xiao were just friends, and he immediately turned around and left with the guy. While Yan Shen was thinking about what happened in the restaurant, Luan approached him and apologized for deciding to go to that restaurant, but the guy began to calm his lover down and to say that it is not his fault. While Tang Xiao was giving Wen a lift, he began to talk about his relationship with Yan Shen, but the main character immediately asked to drop him off, since he wanted to go for a walk alone. That's why the guy let him go, because he loved him so much. Lu Yun looked at the stack of photos of her son that she had sent someone to secretly take with a serious face. In the photo, Gu Yansheng and Shen Luan were holding hands. Below was another photo of Tang Xiao and Wen Nianen, and the woman is tired of enduring all this. Zhou Yuanfeng, a friend of Yan Sheng, and the vice president of Gu Corporation entered the office. Lu Yun asked him to prepare plane tickets for her as she was planning to fly home. As soon as the guy left the office, he immediately informed Yan Shen about his mother's arrival. As soon as the guys arrived at Wen's old house, Yan Shen began to behave like a loving husband, as they were met by the protagonist's father, as soon as the guys entered the house. Then they were met by the protagonist's grandfather. During dinner, Wen decided to go to the restroom, and his father followed him. The man began to wonder how the main character was doing. On the way back, the main character fell asleep on the guy's shoulder and began to have nightmares, but the guy immediately pushed him away. The whole house was unusually quiet. Knowing that Wen Nianen was afraid of the dark, Uncle Shu hired people to install additional lighting in the villa. At night, they turned on automatically from motion sensors. Suddenly, a muffled voice came from behind him. Wen Nianen jumped in fright, put the cookies aside, and straightened up. The main character offered to make the guy coffee, since Uncle Shu was already asleep, and the guy agreed. After that, Gu Yansheng went to his office. In the office, the guy did not turn off the computer after finishing work, but opened another website and pressed the play button. The office was filled with soothing music, composed by the popular mysterious composer Wei. Hearing the sudden change in tone, Wen Nianen already knew exactly what kind of person was on the other end of the line. His heart sank as he realized that the guy would again leave for his lover. Pretending that he did not hear the conversation, he continued to eat. As soon as Wen sat down in the living room and began to cry, Uncle Shu wanted to help him and put his hand on his head. But the main character got scared again and ran away. As soon as he realized what he had done, the main character decided to turn to a psychologist. Dr. Li brought Wen Nianen a glass of hot water, took out an hourglass and put it on the table. Then he walked away from him and sat down on the sofa, picking up a pen and notepad. The doctor began to ask the main character about his condition. Dr. Li escorted Wen Nianen to the door and couldn't help but remind him to let the main character live only for himself. Slowly, he walked to the entrance of the musical instrument store and looked at the exquisite piano in front of the window, standing behind the glass. Suddenly, a voice was heard behind the main character. Wen Nianen jumped in surprise and turned around. He saw Tang Xiao, who was behind him, and was watching him with undisguised curiosity in his eyes. Unexpectedly, Tang Xiao invited the main character to go inside and try to play the piano, but as soon as the guy grabbed Wen's hand, he instinctively pulled it out. Then the guy invited the main character to look at the musical instruments in his studio. As soon as Gu Yansheng entered the living room, he heard the sound of a piano coming from above, and his face instantly darkened. The guy quickly went upstairs, but stopped at the door, listening to the sound of the piano being played. It was only when the sound of the piano suddenly stopped that Gu Yansheng came to his senses. He was annoyed because he found Wen Nianen's acting enjoyable. Wen, startled by the guy's angry voice, jumped up in surprise. The guy approached the main character with a gloomy face and pushed him away. Wen Nianen had never seen such a terrifying expression. He hastily began to explain to the guy, but he didn't even listen to him. It turned out to be Shen Luan's piano. No wonder he treated it so carefully. Wen Nianen walked over and sat down hesitantly, but his hand stopped just as he was about to touch the keys. But seeing Tang Xiao's pleading look, he sighed and lowered his hands to the keys. Gradually the sound of a piano was heard, and Tang Xiao's heart beat to the beat of the music as he obsessively looked at the person in front of him. As before, a young man in a white shirt sat alone with his back to the sun. At that moment, his heart was stolen by Wen Nianen. Tang Xiao smiled like a fool all the way to the car, and his eyes never left Wen Nianen. Not noticing that there was a pillar in front of him, he crashed straight into it. Wen heard the painful cry and immediately reached out his hand to help him, but in the end, he did not touch him. Wen couldn't refuse such a simple request from the guy, so he took out a handkerchief to wipe away the blood. However, neither of them noticed that someone nearby caught this moment with the click of the shutter. Yan Shen parked his car on the side of the road not far from the music studio. He lit a cigarette in the car and began to look around. Suddenly he saw Wen Nianen's car parked on the opposite side of the street, and he himself calmly walked out from there, heading to the studio. After returning home, Wen Nianen made edits to what he recorded today. He found several places whose sound did not reach the result he wanted, and even after making a few changes, he still thought he could do even better. Thoughtfully, Wen looked at the piano installed in the room. A shadow of sadness flashed in his eyes. It was his mother's favorite piano. She played it when she was still alive, but after Gu Yansheng forbade him to play, he never touched it again. Wen Nianen walked over and carefully touched the piano keys. Hearing the threatening timbre of the voice, the main character turned pale and looked around in fear. Gu Yansheng's evil face was in front of his eyes. He felt his heart being frozen by a piece of ice. Gu Yansheng hit the piano again and again, making a terrifying sound that seemed to turn into a howl at the end. Wen knelt down and absent-mindedly looked at the remains of the piano that he had cared so much about, but which was mercilessly destroyed. Suddenly there was a noise from below. Wen Nianen opened the door and walked out. When he came downstairs, he was shocked to see two people standing in the living room. He couldn't believe what was happening in front of him. Gu Yansheng brought Shen Luan to their house. Hearing the two talking to each other as if they were a couple, Wen Nianen's body froze. His hands holding the silverware trembled, and his appetite completely disappeared. Gu Yansheng quickly ate breakfast, but his gaze subconsciously glanced at Wen Nianen's figure. Only after Shen Luan finished eating did Gu Yansheng stand up and leave the dining table. After they left, Wen Nianen put the cutlery in the dishwasher, along the way asking Uncle Shu how the birthday preparations are going. On Yan Shen's birthday, Wen Nianen felt out of place and wanted to go upstairs. Turning around, he accidentally bumped into someone. As soon as the main character looked up, he saw Yuan Feng. Yan Sheng turned his head, but even he was surprised to see a man walking down the stairs. Unlike his usual short hair, his curly, slightly longer hair matched his white suit perfectly, showing a sense of attractiveness and a touch of innocence. Wen approached Yan Shen and stopped. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he was embarrassed, but still raised a glass of wine and congratulated the guy. Only then did the guy come to his senses. Feeling increasingly irritated and embarrassed, he took a glass of wine and drank it in one gulp to calm his feelings. Just as Wen Nianen was about to continue his congratulations, the sound of a piano suddenly sounded in the hall, and all the guests headed towards the direction from which the melody was heard. Gu Yansheng's eyes lit up when he heard the sound, and he also walked in that direction. Somehow, a piano appeared in the banquet hall, and a pianist played in the brightly lit room. Wen also approached. When he saw the piano, he felt that it was a little familiar. But when he looked at the man playing the piano, he could only see a vague silhouette. Wen Nianan grabbed the arm of Shen Luan, who was still playing the piano, and forced him to stand up. The guy got scared out of surprise and began to resist. Seeing that he was still lying, the main character became more and more angry. Tang Xiao ran into the hospital and headed to the desired ward. It turned out that Wen had drunk heavily at night and suffered gastrointestinal bleeding. The guy was shocked that the main character behaved this way. As soon as the doctor with Tang Xiao stepped aside, he said that most likely the main character was bullied, since there were many wounds on his body, which made the guy so angry that he punched the wall. Luan began to put his plan into action, and therefore he posted a photo of Tang Xiao with Wen Nan An online. As soon as Yanshen saw it, he became very angry, because he thought that the main character had really cheated on him. As soon as the main character entered the house, Yanshen started shouting at him. After Wen saw the photo, he explained when and at what angle the photo was taken. The guys were so furious that they both agreed to sign an agreement to break the engagement. But unexpectedly, the main character refused to sign the documents. So Yanshen decided to take a radical step and took the main character to the basement, to close it there. As soon as Wen was in the basement, he lost consciousness, and Yuan Fen immediately attacked the guy. As soon as Yuan Fen said that the main character was in the hospital and had not even recovered yet, the guy fell into a stupor. As soon as the blonde opened the basement door, he ordered the guy to take the main character in his arms. All the people in Gu Company were shocked to see Xiao Li inform Zhou Yuanfeng about the company's situation. Where did Mr. Gu go? How did it happen that Mr. Zhou came to replace the CEO? The man standing by the window slowly turned around. Looking at the familiar face in front of him, Zhou Yuanfeng lowered his wine glass in surprise. Both were stunned as soon as their eyes met. Tang Longshuan didn't expect that the person who invited him was the one he met at Gu Yansheng's birthday banquet. Now, remembering how he aggressively stepped on this man's foot the other day, he felt very satisfied. Wen remained unconscious for a day, showing no signs of awakening. Uncle Shu was so worried that he paced around the house all day and wondered whether to send Wen Nianan to the hospital. But when he met Gu Yansheng's dissatisfied face, he swallowed what he wanted to say. Gu Yansheng did not think that he had done anything inappropriate towards his husband. He thought that one had betrayed him first, and this infuriated him. And the fact that the guy dared to insult Luan was a trigger for him to lose control and use more physical violence than expected. Shen Luan opened the door and saw Gu Yansheng standing at the door, holding his favorite tiramisu. After the guy entered the house, he hugged Shen Luan and did not let go for a long time. This scared the boy. Suddenly the phone rang. Gu Yanshen was busy eating dinner, so he turned on speakerphone mode. On the phone, Uncle Shu asked the guy to come back home, since the main character kept shouting his name in his sleep. But the guy refused and hung up. As soon as the guy passed out, because Luan had mixed sleeping pills into his wine, the boy began to undress the guy. In the morning, the guy received a call from Yuan Feng on his phone, as he was waiting for the guy at the airport to fly away. The guy loved Shen Luan very much, but had not yet divorced Wen. For Gu Yansheng, intimacy between lovers was sacred, so he did not want to enter into an intimate relationship with Shen Luan before the divorce. But everything happened quite the opposite. Lu Yun hurried upstairs to Wen Nianan's room. Yuan Feng handed over the luggage to Uncle Shu and followed her. Seeing Wen lying on the bed with a deathly pale face and a scar on his forehead, the girl felt her heart sank and her mood immediately became depressed. As soon as the guy entered the house, he began to apologize for not being able to pick up his mother. Before Gu Yansheng could finish his sentence, he staggered from an unexpected kick. Lu Yun ordered the guy not to go to his lover anymore. Lu Yun began to yell at her son even more for causing damage not only to the company, but also to Wen Nianan. The guy began to blame his mother for the fact that he initially did not want this marriage. He wanted to marry Luan. While Lu Yun and Yan Shen were quarreling, Wen came down to them and said that he agreed to the divorce. The main character no longer felt pain, as he had suffered a lot from the guy. Lu Yun helped the main character climb to the top and ordered the guy not to take a step to the top. As soon as Yan Shen was left alone in the living room with Yuan Fen, the man admitted that the main character was like a younger brother to him, and the guy caused him too much pain. But as soon as the guy began to blame Wen, Yuan punched him in the face. As soon as Lu Yun went down to the living room, she ordered Yan Shen to leave the mansion more, and that now, instead of Uncle Shu, he would now take care of the main character. The guy's mother threatened him with Lu An, so he had no choice but to obey. Gu Yansheng did not say anything. He began to go upstairs with dissatisfaction, holding a tray of porridge in his hands, since he could not do anything to Yuan Feng. As soon as the guy entered the room, it turned out that the main character was taking a shower. The guys slept together all night, as this was another order from Lu Yun. The next morning, when the main character went down to the kitchen, he met the guy's mother there, which surprised him greatly, since he did not expect to see her here so early. Wen asked his mother for leave to go for a walk and ran to the hospital, where he asked his attending physician to get him pills even stronger than the previous ones, since he again could not sleep at night. When the main character was returning home, Tang Xiao called him and offered to meet him, so the main character immediately went to him. As soon as the guys arrived at the studio, Tang Xiao showed a gift for the guy. It was a piano. It turned out that back in middle school, the main character loved to play the piano, and so Tang Xiao went to school and asked for the model of the instrument, and when he found it, he gave it to the main character. Suddenly, the main character began to cry because he felt insignificant. As soon as one asked if he was worthy of making music, Tang Xiao could not stand it and hugged the guy, and he gave up and began to cry. Later, the main character admitted that he agreed to the divorce, and suddenly Tang Xiao asked if he had a chance to be with him. As soon as Tang Xiao led Wen to the car, he noticed antidepressants in the car. As soon as the main character returned home, Lu Yun invited him to talk to his father. Unexpectedly, the father asked the main character to return home for a while, since the anniversary of his mother's death is coming up. As soon as Wen An finished speaking with his father, he began to go up to his room. On the way, he met Yan Shen, but the main character simply walked past him. But suddenly, the guy began to ask why the main character returned so early. In the morning, Yan Shen came to pick Wen up for breakfast, and when he got angry again and grabbed the main character's hand, Wen suddenly broke free and asked not to touch him. At breakfast, Lu Yun invited the guys to go to the concert with her, since her friend gave her tickets. Wen refused to go to the concert and said that he wanted to go home, so Lu Yun decided that it was best for him to recover, and they would go to the concert later. All day long, Yan Xin thought about why the main character had changed so much and pretended that they were strangers. While Yan Shen was looking at the pendant in his hand, Wen came into his room and started asking where he got the pendant from. It turned out that this was the pendant of the main character's mother. At breakfast, Yuan Fei was again sitting with the guys, looking after the guy so that he wouldn't do anything wrong. While the guys were driving in the car, Wen decided to ask whether Yan Shen had the pendant with him, and when he said that it was not his, the main character admitted that it was his pendant. But the guy didn't believe him again and started screaming. The guys came to a party with Wen's favorite performer, and while the main character approached the piano, Miss Phil approached him and began to wonder if he could play. Unexpectedly, the woman asked the main character to play for them. As soon as Wen's fingers touched the keys, everyone in the hall fell silent and began to listen to his beautiful melody, and Miss Phil stood pleased with the performance of the main character. After finishing the game, the woman invited the main character to become her student. When the guys went home because of Yan Shen's next prank, the guy at home still couldn't understand what was wrong with the main character. A little later, the guy went to his lover to give him a piano. While Yan Shen was busy in the garden, his wedding ring broke. Therefore, the main character immediately ran to the jewelry store to have it repaired. It turned out that the main character's ring was a fake. The main character was so desperate that he ran out of the store and ran down the street right in the rain. On the way, he met Yan Shen and his lover, but the main character continued to run wherever his eyes could see. As soon as one sat down in the alley and began to cry, Tang Xiao came to him. Tang Xiao hugged one and started talking about how strong he was. When Yan Shun came to a meeting for work, he had to take Lu An with him, and the guy again did something that caused Yan Shun to attack an innocent person and start beating him. Suddenly, Yan Shun began to see different people who were not at the meeting, and then he lost consciousness. As soon as the guys were brought home, he opened his eyes for a second, and as soon as he saw the main character, he was immediately happy. But Wen just turned around and left. When Yan Shen began to quarrel with his mother again, Wen entered the room and began to ask for a divorce, since he no longer wanted to endure eternal lies. Showing the guy the ring, the main character threw it on the floor and hurried to leave the room. As soon as the main character arrived at Madame Jian's party, she immediately saw him and ran up to him. She could not take her eyes off him, since he looked very much like his mother. Unexpectedly, Yan Shun showed up at the party with his lover. While Lu An was in the garden, he was attacked for beating their president. But the guy started shouting that he was not Yan Shen's husband and took the guys to Wen. The main character was hit on the head and taken away in a car. As soon as Wen came to his senses, the man began to tell him that if he behaved well, they would not do anything to him. Out of despair, the main character curled up into a ball. Suddenly, the man began to beat the main character. In desperation, Wen Nianen curled up into a ball, clasping his head in his hands, which sent out bursts of pain. He looked at the blood running down the white suit. In a panic, he raised his hand to wipe it, but the rubbing only made the stains on his sleeves grow larger. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Gu Yansheng turned his head, looking around. Uncle Shu quickly walked over and opened the door. When he saw who was standing at the door, he screamed in shock. Uncle Shu's voice suddenly stopped, his eyes slowly drooped, and he looked at Wen Nianen's blood-splattered white suit in amazement. Seeing Wen Nianen's bloody suit and injured face, Gu Yanshen was equally shocked. The glass of wine in his hand fell to the floor. His face was also covered in blood, and there were bloody footprints on the floor behind Wen Nianen. 5 hours before, it turned out that the main character beat all the guys with a bat, and so he was able to leave. At home, as soon as the main character promised that he would reveal Luan's true identity, Wen went to his room without even paying attention to the guy. As soon as Wen signed the divorce papers, he immediately took them to Yan Shen, and when he saw the papers, he began to shout that the main character had no right to divorce him. Suddenly, Lu Yun entered the house and said that she would not allow the guys to get a divorce. Suddenly, Wen put a knife to his neck and said that if Yan Shun did not sign the papers, he would kill himself. But suddenly, Tang Xiao ran into the house and asked the main character to put down the knife and not harm himself. As soon as Yan Shun signed the papers, Wen said thank you to Tang Xiao and lost consciousness. As soon as the guy wanted to take the main character in his arms, Tang Xiao took him away, and saying never to approach the main character again, he took Wen to the hospital. After Wen was admitted to the hospital, then his father ran there and began asking Tang Xiao about how his son was doing, since he was not warned that his son had been missing for several days. The guy calmed the man down and said that everything would soon be known. As soon as the doctor came out to the guys, he said that everything was fine with the main character, and he needed at least 5 days to recover. But he asked where the main character received such injuries, and why no one went to the police. As soon as Yan Shen arrived at the hospital, Wen had already woken up. But suddenly the guy began to come closer and closer to him, and the main character began to scream and ask him to leave, because he didn't want to see him. The next day, when Yan Shun went down to the living room, he saw Uncle Shu collecting the main character's things. It turned out that Wen An asked him to collect all his things. In the hospital, Tang Xiao came to the main character, and his beauty even made the guy blush and feel shy. As soon as Yan Shun returned from a business trip, after work he immediately decided to go to the hospital to see the main character. But in the ward he saw Tang Xiao, so he immediately turned around and left, but on the way he met Yuan Fei. Tang Xiao spent all the time with the main character. He didn't even let the guy get up on his feet after the operation and carried him everywhere in a chair. When the guys went outside, Tang Xiao made a snowman for the main character, since a lot of snow had fallen outside. Suddenly, everyone on the internet started writing about the main character cheating on Yan Shun, but the main character was already used to this, even after the guys got divorced. While Tang Xiao encouraged the main character, the guy began to solve the problem. The next day, the doctor said that the protagonist's legs had fully recovered, and therefore he could be discharged at any time. Therefore, Wen decided to immediately check out, which Tang Xiao was surprised by, because the main character was bored in the hospital. As soon as the main character returned to his old house, where he lived with his father and mother, he decided to take back everything that was taken from him, and he would no longer allow anyone to control his life. When Tang Xiao was writing a song, the main character quietly approached him from behind. A little later, Luan decided to take all the glory of the main character for himself, since Wen had a channel with songs. After the show, everyone began to think that the composer of the songs was Yan Shen's lover, and the main character continued to think through a plan for revenge.